Just let me know when you get ready, Diana.
I'm ready.
Okay. Don't want to interrupt your important business there. Now what? You talked to your mama?
Yeah, I talked to her and basically, just, she's always hammered into my head that my dad was, perfect in every way. And I guess it was because she wanted to leave me with good memories, but, I mean, he left, you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
So it just kind of made me angry, and I realized that I did never deal with it. I didn't ever even think about it that way, but he did. He left all the time. That wasn't right. So it just made me angry.
And what was it like talking to your mom about it?
It was. I mean, I think we had a good conversation. She's a pretty easy person to talk to. I mean, it was. It was weird because I felt myself losing myself, and I was more emotional. You know what I mean? I was losing myself in anger talking to her, and I got mad at her. She tried to tell me that he didn't leave me, he didn't abandon me, it was all her fault.
Well, then she's a bitch.
Yeah, no, that's what I'm saying.
Yeah, okay.
I got angry at her because it's let's just call it what it is.
Okay, cool. So that's different. All right. Well, good. So that was fun to do? You chilling more? Maybe?
I mean, not where I want to be, but definitely more, yeah.
I wrote a story about 5 or 6, 7 years ago called The Princess and the Dragonfly. And when I wrote that, I was going through a bunch of stuff. I was almost obsessed writing the thing. And I got done, but I had no real clarity about what it meant. There's several different levels you can look at it on. And now, 5, 6, 7 years later, what I'm working on, started working on Monday, is developing a workbook to go along with it, because I talk about it as a fairy tale for grown-ups, and it's about a princess and a prince and a dragonfly. On the meta level, it's about the integration of the male and the female. The Greeks talk about the soul. The soul of a man, in the Greek thought, is feminine. The soul of a woman in the Greek thought is masculine. And this is not about biology, it's about different ways or modes of being in the world. Feminine typically is more organic and creative and connected, where the masculine force or power or whatever is typically more analytical, forceful, and separate. And we all have those aspects of ourselves, typically because of testosterone or estrogen. We live out of one more than the other. Okay, but all males have estrogen and all females have testosterone on a biological level. Generally, when I'm dealing with folks, when they're having dreams, if you've had dreams, whether they be sexual or not, the redheaded girl, that's a feminine aspect of you. You got a little bitchy crack whore part of you. Okay? So do I. So do whatever. It's like. And what I want to do today is read you the first chapter and then go through some of the questions that I'm thinking about, because I'm wanting to develop good questions for folks and just see what your response may be. And I'm just for right now, just given the time we have, I thought I'd read the first chapter. And if some of y'all would, as you read it, just maybe take some notes of some associations you have. Okay? And I'm going to read the story, and then after I read it, then I'm going to go back and ask some questions. Is that okay? Yeah. Okay. Once upon a time, there was a princess who never knew. And she never knew because she was never told. And that which remained unspoken, though, was her true identity. She lived among those who never knew or forgot, or for some hidden reason never acknowledged or called forth her true self. Blessing withheld out of ignorance or by design, but denied nevertheless. She was a beautiful child with intelligent eyes and an inquisitive nature. And she smiled, and it was like sunshine bouncing off the water. It lit up the world around her, and her nose would crinkle delicately in the most charming fashion, and the happy light in her eyes would bring joy to those fortunate enough to come under her gaze. And she loved beautiful things. She loved trying to understand the world as it showed itself to her. And she was loved enough. She was cared for, but the people around her did not see the world as she did or possess her thirst for depth. And that blood flowing through her veins would never allow her to rest and be satisfied with normal. She tried to fit in and did for the most part, but there was always something which haunted, teased. It caused some dissatisfaction, some hunger, some longing, some question, some second thought that there ought to be more. Something which haunted the periphery of her vision was not quite settled. And she distrusted perfect things and people. She tended to be drawn to the uncommon, even what others considered flawed. She tended to seek out things and had a knack for looking past the surface of a thing and discerning its nature. What she did not know then was that her birthright was calling, beckoning her outside. And she was indeed uncommon, yet she saw herself as somehow less than. What she considered as flaws in herself were merely the differences between her and those around her whose aptitude was limited. And on those boundaries and in that tension, she gradually, slowly blossomed, becoming a singularly unique being with the ability to give blessings denied her. And she was a rare beauty both inside and out. She was intelligent, quick-witted, loyal, and tender toward others in need. But there was a problem sometimes as she interacted with people whose vision was blurred and whose blunted desires were either lost or never quickened. For in that they shaped and defined her world, she began to doubt the ill-defined calling of her own heritage. She began to doubt her true self until slowly and over time, she made for herself a castle to live in. It was tall and well fortified, and from it she could observe and even interact with people. It was enchanted with some secret enchantment that flowed from the nature of her birthright. And from there she could live and move and even appear present with others, and all the while was safe and locked behind the walls she had constructed. She lived alone in the castle for the most part. Though she stayed engaged in her interest and the people of her life, her true self made its home there behind the walls. She began to accept the arrangement as final and good, and it was. But her heritage would not remain quiet, and no matter how good things got, there were times when the restlessness would come. The routines and people and interests that generally held her attention would seem flat and two-dimensional. A strange longing would well up within her. They were strangely familiar desires that seemed to call to her from faraway places. She would find herself looking toward the mountains set far in the distance, or watching the waves crash into the shoreline. She would wistfully gaze beyond the far horizon and dream about what might lie beyond it. During these times, home seemed unfamiliar, and that beautifully strange longing seemed to originate from what seemed to be her more true habitation. These soul journeys, as she called them, were confusing and even painful at times. They seemed crazy to her. Who hears such things in their head? Surely she was not normal. It was frustrating that the world she had fashioned did not finally quiet the call to explore that which lay just outside her castle. There were times when the calling on her would become painful, and a bittersweet sadness would saturate her being. But even the sweet, sad ache sometimes seemed more real and alive than her life there behind the castle walls. And in the secret heart of her heart, she wished that it could all somehow be true. And at times it would become more than she could stand. Her noble being longed to shout a resounding yes to the call, to venture out into places unknown, to grapple with questions not yet fully formed, to find answers to those longings too deep for words. Yet she was in a way constrained by those around her. She had no example within the world, and would shake off the longings as fantasy and unrealistic, and then settle back into the routines of the everyday. At other times, she would seek to quiet the call by not thinking too deeply about anything. Avoiding the depths, she attempted to have fun in the moment, thrill with the excitement of the now. And at times it was exhilarating, but none of it ever quite reached her heart. It never bridged the gap between the inside and the out, or filled the voids between the surface and the deep. Then one day, as she was musing about life, allowing her soul to just roam free, she idly twirled a daisy between her thumb and her index finger. She watched the whirling, spinning flower petals, thinking of nothing in particular. She was feeling generally satisfied and alert, but not quite awake. And out of that energy, a vague, warm, misty want emerged. It was not terrible, and it was even pleasant in some ways. And buoyed there between waking and dreaming, she caught a flash of light just inside the boundary of her vision. Lifting her eyes, she sought and found a most amazing creature. It was pure light, or so it seemed, iridescent and multicolored. Like the facets of a gem, the light reflected its surroundings, but multiplied and most clear. As she watched the creature's flight, darting, skimming, almost scurrying across the water's surface, she felt something move deep within her and drawing her to it. She believed that the creature held some enchantment, for she felt the lure of her castle walls begin to diminish. The call of her true nature began to arise in her more strongly than she had ever felt it. She watched as it moved through the air. She was struck by its power and poise. It seemed to effortlessly move in any direction at will, and she longed for such freedom. She studied the iridescence through the changing light, and she was moved to throw down her castle walls and be like this creature, true to herself and reflecting the world back to itself as she moved through it. To be in the moment yet fully present without walls seemed heaven itself. She felt rather than thought these things. She had yet to find language to fit the stream now flowing from the well of her soul. She was transfixed as she studied the creature's most amazing eyes, which could see almost 360 degrees around itself. Oh, to see that clearly and honestly, both herself and the world around her. Her amazement deepened. She experienced excitement running through her, which left her feeling exalted and lifted up. Her heart pounded in her chest. The hot blood of her noble birthright flowed freely through her veins. She watched spellbound as the little creature slowed, caught a branch, folded its wings, and became still, at rest. Its colors merged into almost pure silver. So unmingled was the color that it bordered on being translucent. And in that moment she stood on the boundary of her castle wall, willing herself to cross and be near this creature. The call of herself on herself was tremendous, yet just as she was to take the first step outside the wall, she experienced an opposite and opposing force. In the past, she would have shrunk back inside, but this time a new determination, a focused anger, a force of will arose and would not be moved. Joy, desire, and longing flooded her and began to form constructs which should have become a resounding yes to those desires. But even as she began to form the chorus, to mouth the affirmative, she was pulled back from the edge. and she struggled to carve out a new place for herself, independent of both impulses. She surrendered to each of them simultaneously. She let go and found new freedom. She stepped outside and found new protection. She was focused on the creature which had enchanted and moved her slow. Emotions welled up in her to the point that she could no longer contain them. Her mouth moved to form her joyful response, and just as she released it, the protective impulse engaged in the form of her biting her lower lip, thus stifling the sound to the point that the only noise which could be heard was an hushed but joyous resonance barely above a whisper. She mouthed, "Beautiful, beautiful." And the sound seemed to float in the air and move toward and come to rest on the creature. The creature stirred, a kaleidoscope of jewel-toned colors cascaded up and down its length and breadth. Its wings moved and lifted into the air. It flew toward the girl and hovered just out of reach. The princess' heart pounded, unsure of what was coming, but maintained her place in the new space she had created. She felt shy, lifted up, exposed, protected, and exhilarated at once. It was as if the creature was appraising her with those marvelous eyes. It was unnerving, yet she felt life pulsing through her. For the first time in forever, she felt at home in her body and connected with the outside world. She stood there, heart pounding, a nervous excitement moving through her like the colors on the creature. She was a bit breathless under the creature's gaze. "Beautiful," she whispered, and the creature approached. Her heart jumped as it neared her. She wanted to touch, to feel, to experience contact. She hesitated. The creature flew toward her and brushed against her fingertip, and still she hesitated. Again the creature brushed lightly against her finger, but this time she felt heat upon contact with it. She lifted her right index finger to examine the spot, and the creature came to rest there. She felt its tiny feet clutching her skin and shivered. Her eyes were fixed on the living jewel before her, its wings slowly moving, its eyes returning the gaze. That day began a new chapter in her life. She found a new way to move through the world. She gradually began to work a bargain between the opposing forces within her. She began to unconsciously bite her lip whenever the call was strong. It mediated both impulses and allowed her to remain on the boundary between the two. It happened whenever she needed to be fully present yet not exposed. If she was working on or thinking about a problem intently, she could be seen gently biting her lip, as if to help her concentration and keep her balance there on the razor's edge. If she was sweetly surprised or touched by some honest gesture, her smile would be moderated by her teeth, and a most dearing and darling presence would exude from her. And at times, in the throes of some passionate endeavor, when all the walls were shaken to their foundation, she would bite down hard to keep the pure power of her heart's exultation from shattering and tumbling the walls around her. And during these times, the creature would visit as if called or summoned by her endearing and attractive habit. She would hold out her right index finger, and the creature that she began to call Dragonfly would alight there. Every time it lit on her, she felt a slight burning on her skin, and over time there built up a little saddle for it to ride upon. For the longest time, they were the best, if not the oddest pair. And through its enchantment, the dragonfly helped the princess expand the space where she could touch both inside and out. And she learned much about the inside of her castle and explored rooms she had forgotten about or never knew existed. She explored more of the outside world as well as the people in it. All the while, she stored up knowledge and the wisdom her existence required. Then one day, when she called, biting her lip and extending her finger, her friend was slow in appearing. For over time, she began to outgrow the space she and the dragonfly had created. She had encountered a new boundary from which she could not move back, but did not know how to move forward. She felt frightened and trapped, and it seemed that just as she needed her friend's help the most, it was nowhere to be found. A rush of emotions flooded her: sadness, anger, longing, fear, and they all competed for dominance. She struggled to balance them once more. One after the other would arise and push or pull her back toward one extreme or the other. A retreat back into her secure walls, or an impulsive rush into freedom and the unknown. The tension mounted and the pressure increased. It was as if she was smothered and ground down between them and would be forced to bridge the two if she were to survive. She felt as if she would soon be torn apart, but something in her rebelled, and she held her place, determined to stand her ground. She was weakened, and she felt her strength failing, and in that awful crucible, just as her last effort ceased, something unforeseen occurred. As her final reserve of strength left her, something new sprung from its ashes. A strange thought began to take shape in her mind. It was new and radical to her experience. She unclasped clenching hands and released her hold on all those forces and circumstances she had sought to control and keep at bay. As she let go, an oppressive weight lifted from her. She felt her back straighten and her shoulders lost their slump. With a calm, strong voice, she said, "Enough." She had decided. She had decided to decide. And as she lifted her gaze, she saw there hovering just in front of her, her friend watching her with those enchanted eyes. She held out her hand, offering her finger with its now familiar resting place, expecting to resume their warm rapport. But the dragonfly flew past her outstretched hands and landed on her lips. Its colors joyous, exuding love. And she felt strangely warmed, connected, and at peace. The dragonfly then left her lips, hovered in front of her beaming face, gazed at her through loving, happy, and approving eyes, then swiftly turned and flew away. And that was her first dragonfly kiss. Now we don't drown in spit, we can move on. Let's see. Okay, I talked about that. Now, the idea of blessing. In our common usage, it's very pedestrian. Say the blessing, or get somebody to say some particular words over us so that God may like us and whatever. That's not the real meaning of blessing. You can find more about that or know more about that if you read about Jacob and Esau. Y'all ever read about Jacob and Esau? So Esau was going to kill him not over his birthright, but over the blessing that was stolen. Blessing has more to do with being seen, acknowledged, approved of. You already have everything you need. In our culture, we don't have any real initiations anymore. You know? I mean, about all we got is you hanging around with your 15-year-old friends and smoking pot. That's your initiation into life. Or you drank a beer, or you saw some titties for the first time, and you're somehow, you know. But the process of blessing formally, and this is my ideal and stereotype of it. I'm sure it's not exactly right, but basically, in older cultures more attuned to and connected to the world of the earth, there was a sense that all the souls come from the Creator. Okay, that Mom and Daddy didn't do them, but God did it, and God gave us something, and their job was to study that human soul for years or however long, and then they were kind of on probation a little bit, learning the societal rules or whatever. And then at some point, the elders would call that person out, take them through some kind of initiation, and tell them what they've seen. You know, in the Old Testament, somewhere it says, train up a child in the way they should go, and when they're old, they won't. Training up is not about making them do tricks. It's about understanding the nature of a child and providing some structures for it to grow, like if you're growing grapes. You know, anybody ever grown grapes or stuff on vines? You don't obsess over all the little particulars. You understand the nature of a grape, and so you just provide it support and let it go. And part of blessing, many of us don't even know what that means because we've never experienced it. Have any of y'all seen me look at you and you go, oh shit, he saw me? Y'all know what I'm saying? Y'all know what I'm saying? And it was okay? And you felt like, cool. You know what I'm saying? And some of y'all, I've kissed you on your head. Some of you, I've touched you on your head. It's weird, ain't it? Because that's where the blessing is bestowed. It's your crown. You know? Let me go on. No, I'm not answering you. Cool. So what did you feel about the little girl? What are some things you felt about her? If anything, it makes the story.
I identified a lot with the pull back and forth between the two sides. Like there's always that constant. You know?
She was reserved.
And the inside-outside thing, like being inside.
How did you feel?
Similar.
You felt.
Well, it felt freeing to like hear that comparison from someone else, because I think a lot of those things I've just like thought about or discussed. So I identified, and there was a sense of freedom there.
Feel of being different, not different than others. Putting up the walls, around us, isolating like she did in her castle.
A little anxious.
I felt like I could have been her prince. I wanted to be.
You loved her.
Yeah.
Yes. 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 And you are. You are.
That's a kind of chapter.
Because I don't need any philosophical stuff yet. I'm just trying to get just emotion. You know? Because if I did decent enough in my writing, there should be this sense of I recognize her. I feel her. I know her. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. Okay. Because I am her. Because I couldn't have written that if I hadn't known that. That is me. And if I continue to read this story to y'all will know a lot about me if you understand. But if it's true, it's also universal in some ways. You know, that we all are like that in some way.
It made me sad when she withdrew into herself because she didn't feel comfortable being the real her.
And a sense that she didn't, there's also a sense that the real her was never acknowledged or blessed. And so she always doubted the real her. Because the folks that she had been around did not know themselves either. So they could not bless. You know? All right, let me keep. Let's see. We already talked about blessed. Do you feel like you've been blessed or seen or celebrated by anybody? For real?
No.
Yes?
One person.
Okay.
One person. Yeah.
Okay.
I feel like I've been encouraged, but not blessed.
Okay.
I thought sometimes I was blessed for the wrong reason.
The doubt and what we feel is crazy sometimes. You know, our true heritage is calling and we dismiss it. and many times give that up by complying to other folks' wishes. And so we lose ourselves somehow. Okay. So if you've never been blessed, seen or celebrated, do you have trouble sometimes blessing or accepting you? You know? Because it's outside of our experience. Many times we feel the need for it, but can't articulate what we need because we have no experience of it. Can you think of a time when you were lost, when you were a baby or a child, when you were lost in the wonder or the beauty or the amazement of something? If you had a gong or you just boom and you just go wah, and you know, or a sunset or a beautiful something. Because I think, and we'll get to the dragonfly in a minute, but I think that's how God comes at us. You know? Or God's messengers come to us, because the dragonfly ain't God. But what I talk about in terms of these dragonflies' experience happen many times on the edge of very difficult times in our life. Okay? Can you remember just feeling cool? And you're not even thinking, you're just experiencing. And what is normal? Do you feel like you fit in to your family? And what did you have to do in order to fit in if you did? You know? Was your approval, like you're talking about, dependent on your compliance?
I should have been more outspoken. So I kind of think she's coming into her own a bit, maybe. When she came outside the wall.
But she can't will herself out there. That's the thing. We can't we can say should, I should have, I should. But it's not like we can by act of will do it. Because one of the things I'm thinking about this story is it's not a how-to, it's more of an observation of the process. So that if I find myself pulled between those things, or if I find myself depressed, or I find myself angry, or I find myself even in joy, they're all a part of the process. And it's not me making it happen. Because when I'm trying to make it happen, I'm trying to fit into some ideal of where I think the answer is. And it's almost, and that's another wall or construct or boundary. Did you have certain relationships when you were little that created fear in you? Shame. And then the question says, write about them. Because again, as I'm doing this, I'm not trying to get folks to get the right answer. I'm trying to do like we did the dream thing last week, where you just get data out and don't worry about it, because it'll finally just reveal itself to you. It's not about figuring it out. All the data's already there. The figuring out part's what keeps us from seeing the bigger picture. And how do you feel about the people who raised you? Were they able to give you a blessing? Do you think anybody has ever blessed them? If they've not given one, they probably have not had one either. And one of the traps we get into is these patterns that are set up early on in our life, they become stereotypes. That's why sometimes I'll pick at y'all about your mama giving a blowjob. Not to be ugly, but to kind of put some meat and bones on her. She's a real person. Not in her, but on her. Okay? You know what I'm saying? I mean, a lot of y'all are older than your mama was. Some of y'all 15, 20 years older than your mama was, and you're still mad at a 22-year-old. You know what I'm saying? And if she was not blessed, she didn't not have the capability of doing the thing. Does that make sense? And we get trapped in these comic book versions of what went on. You know? And generally, most of the time, our parents did better for us than was done for them. Generally. You know? Let's see. And when you were 6, 7, 8, 5, 6, 4, whatever, what were you good at? What interested you? How did you fill your days? Do you remember ever taking any soul journeys?
Yeah.
See? Have you ever had thoughts or dreams but chided yourself for them being silly? That's crazy. Write them down along with any other thoughts that you might feel or whatever. Do you remember daydreams you have ever had? What about recurring nighttime dreams? Just make some notes about them because they might come in handy later. Have you ever felt the tension between wanting something new and the fear of something new? Okay. And then I say, take some time, 5 minutes, and find a daisy to twirl. Get quiet and breathe. Allow your feelings to be whatever they are. Allow your thoughts to fade into the distance and just be. And what was it? What was it like? Do this sometime. And just see what it's like. Don't try to put a label on it or, you don't have to go, You can just twirl a daisy and breathe and hear the birds and the thing and just be. And then who? And I say, who are you? Who's the one paying attention to all the thinking going on in your head? That's the 6-year-old, or the 4-year-old, or the whatever. Still you. Way behind the castle wall. Write down any interesting thoughts or feelings, blah, blah. Have you ever had a dragonfly experience? Where it was like, yeah, and you wanted, and you took a little step, and it was like, this is all new. You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah, ecstasy.
You know, not the kind you do and go, boom, 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 boom. Not that kind. You know. But that's the motivation for the kind you pop in your mouth. You know. Beauty and wonder can amaze and capture us. There's a sense of connection and rightness, a sense of oneness that resonates deeply in us. That, yes, this is what I was looking for. Y'all know what I'm talking about? And you may have got it through psychedelics or through sex or through whatever. You know? Or what, because our soul needs that. But I'm thinking more of something that's not induced by anything outside, but something that's induced because it's our soul producing it. Think about, where do you feel at peace and at rest right now? Or in the past? What experience have made you feel transcendent? And so my idea is that folks just kind of write this stuff down Don't do nothing with it, just write it down. But there's a truth that many times these experiences have pain associated with it. You know? And you'll notice that every time the dragonfly touched her, it burned a little bit. You know? How has beauty and wonder also caused pain in your life? Because if you see, there's an exquisite burning associated with beauty. It just hurts. And then it gets transformed into, it hurts so good, you know, and I need a tattoo, and whatever, and, you know, spank me because I'm a bad boy, or whatever. Right? You know what I'm saying? I'm not saying there's anything wrong with a tattoo or getting spanked. And that's not an issue. That's not what I'm talking about. You know. But what I am saying is that these transcendent times of beauty many times can also have this exquisite pain with it. Let's see. Spiritual and psychological growth typically occurs in stages, the ebb and flow that seems gradual and all of a sudden at once. Seems like forever, and then there's this breakthrough, there's this something. And once that kind of thing happens, we tend, and we'll stay there for a while, but after a while we'll outgrow it. Anybody had a new insight in the last year and then you thought, yes, I finally got it? And after a while it just feels like the one before, and we outgrow it. And we look for the old crutches that got us to this place. You know, the girl was kind of dependent on the dragonfly for a while. And then she got to a point where the dragonfly didn't appear and she was mad at the dragonfly. You know, I mean, we need our mama's titties when we're a year old or so. If we're 17, something's odd. You know, that's why God gives them teeth. So when you bite in your mama's titty, she'll pull it out. And I say this pattern all the time. I deal with a lot of teenage boys. His daddy's in prison, mama's this. And mama and grandma packed this boy in cotton for 15 years. Never weaned him. I'm talking about physically. It is Chilton County though. And it may have been a good little boy till he's 13, 14, 15, then go crazy. Some of y'all like that? Y'all very compliant, and then, right? And then the mamas come and they say, well, baby, you got to pull your titty out his mouth. And she's scared to do that. You know? Because she's just as habituated to that emotional breastfeeding as the kid is. And a lot of times, y'all ever weaned your babies or took their pacifier away from them? You know what I'm talking about? They hate your ass. You motherfucker, they would say if they had those words. Right? They hate you. Let's see where we're going at. So, do you ever find yourself in a place where you don't know how to move forward or can't go back? What is that like for you? Y'all know what I'm saying? And many times we get in that place and we're mad about it. And actually, that's the place you want to be. It just sucks for a minute. It's like mama taking her titty out of your mouth, or the dragonfly not showing up anymore, or whatever. Rather than a negative thing, it's actually the harbinger of there's some growth about to happen. If we can sit there. Okay? Just sit there. So many times we want to go do something or fix something or figure something, but it's not going to happen in our head. It happens from somewhere else. And one of the cool things about it is if you can look back and see you've gone through different transitions and different growth spurts, because it usually happens more like this kind of thing than this kind of thing. And when you're down here and you're down here, it feels exactly the same. But these are very different places. Does that make sense? It feels the same. We will typically have similar responses if we just remember. And then, because you didn't start the first one. You didn't start this one. You didn't start, you know? Okay. Can you remember a time when a radical new idea about yourself and the world emerged within you? What was it? What was it like? What was going on in your life then? So what does the dragonfly kiss mean to you from that story? And what does it mean that the dragonfly kissed her and then flew away? What does it mean when we feel close to God and then 3 days later we don't know where in the hell God is? So, were these questions helpful at all? What are you thinking?
That I've been through all that.
Who said that? And you're a dude, right? It has nothing to do with whether we got peckers or vaginas. Okay. And the next chapter is about the little boy that kind of goes the opposite way. Because looking back on my process with this, the generative or the feminine, the creative part of me was hidden behind walls forever, except in my teal show. When I show up and do dance monkey boy, and then they throw me my bananas, and I got real good at it, and it worked for a while, and it was fine. But I outgrew that, and there's something else welled up in me, and all of it didn't come out beautifully or righteously, but it came out, and the generative or the feminine creative part of me produced that story. There's another part of me that's about the conqueror and the analytical and all that we'll get to later. But there's a part of us that if is not blessed will create walls. We will have doubt. We will hear, smell, feel these callings from our true self, and we'll dismiss them many times. And we'll develop walls or defense mechanisms or roles that we get into, and we'll interact with people, but they don't see our walls. They think it's us because they're behind walls, and we think it's them. A lot of marital relationships, romantic relationships, are people with these stereotypes of each other until you use the same toilet for 6 or 8 months, and then you go, bitch. And she'll go, you little fucker. You know what I'm saying? And we will get trapped into wanting to fix them. If they could just change to fit my stuff. You don't understand. Well, you don't understand you, so how can they understand you? You've not listened to the calling of your royal blood, you know? And the cool thing is we don't do it. It's not something we go searching for out here. It's paying attention to the weird, the crazy, the fringe parts of us. And remembering that I didn't create me. I'm not the thinker. Y'all know the sculpture of the thinker that's chiseling himself out of stone? That's a mindset. That's a materialist kind of thing, that I am creating myself. I am responsible for who I am and what I do and all that kind of stuff. And that's true if we're in our egoic state. But I think a better picture is more, rather than face down trying to chisel something out, is I'm in the roots in the dirt and I'm reaching for the sun. I didn't create me. All I have to do is just put down roots and reach. And what I am, the intention of who I am will manifest. It's not on me to do it. Does that make any sense, y'all, what I'm saying? You know? Is if I am in my truer self, I'm less apt to commit injury on another person. Or those things we label as sins. Because when I'm I need to make myself, I'm in an anxious state, I'm in fear. I need to comply with the system, whether that's a micro or macro sense. And I need to find which box that I fit in, but I'm a round peg, so I don't know how to do that. But I'm going to squeeze, you know. And y'all, this is the good news. This is the gospel. That you are already fearfully and wonderfully made. That you do not have a spirit of fear, but power and love and a sound mind. That God, the Creator, has known you from before the foundations. And He blesses you. Nothing, nobody can take you out of His hands. It's already all right. Not someday, it's already all right. It's just when we doubt that it's already all right, it's when we do stupid shit. You know? Become as a little child if you would enter the kingdom of heaven. Don't be grown up, or you need to grow up. Well, fuck. How'd that work out? You know? Mm-hmm. All right, it's all right. Bye.